And the thing that stood out for me the most was life has a way of training us out of paying attention to part of ourselves that acts from a place of pure passion. Part of us that likes to play in the storm drain just because it's fun.
Mhm.
I would love for you just to start off our interview today, just sharing with people about how you discovered more of who you are in the process to where you are today.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's such a great question. What a fun place to start. Well, yeah, the first chapter of the book, I do talk about sort of loving to play in a storm drain as a child and just really, and sort of my love of the ocean and how it later manifested, in surfing. But I think I definitely meant what I wrote, which is that, I, like a lot of people, I think had not been propelled in my career by what I was most excited about. I ended up being really propelled by what I thought was expected of me, what would pay the bills, what might look impressive. And at some point found myself quite unhappy as a result, as a lawyer that was being paid a lot of money, working at a very fancy firm, but who didn't really enjoy, waking up in the morning. And so I think, uh, we aren't trained to pay attention to what brings us joy and passion and just sort of follow that. But I think what I ended up, finding throughout the course of my career anyway is that I always thought that these things were a trade-off. Like you could either do the things that light you up and be impoverished, or you could do the sensible thing and make money. And I actually think that if in whatever my experience, following, getting in touch with what is it that brings me joy, which was food, community building, making a really wonderful place for people to work, that when I did pursue that, I ended up discovering, I mean, I actually ended up making much more money than I ever had as an attorney. And I genuinely believe that can't be necessarily everyone's path, but it could be many people's path. And that's really why I wrote the book, is, to try to, whether you're just someone who's like quite unhappy in your job and wants to change careers, or whether you think that work could be more rewarding and you're trying to help build a company, or you're an entrepreneur, how do we make places that mean something to us, that mean something to other people? And yeah, how do we build a sustainable future of business that's fun to do?
Yeah. And I agree with you. There are many people out there who maybe, go to school, get the job, and continue on.
Hmm.
But when you're losing that passion, when you don't enjoy getting up in the morning, it's like it's not just about clocking in and how you talk about, build in 6-minute increments.
Yeah.
That is it's such a minutia, and it's not about the quality. And I think it's important for people who are listening or viewing to think about, are you living the quality of life that you want to be living so that you do get excited? Because it sounds like when you made the shift to the mac and cheese, that there was a totally different shift in your energy, and I would love for you to describe how that started to shift who you were as a person.
Yeah, I think I'd actually, I think, been sort of aware of this passion for food and cooking. I had just left it behind actually to become an attorney. Like I went on sort of this circuitous path of, when I was in undergrad, learning to cook for free just because I found it joyful, and then moving to New York and working in restaurants. And then I just sort of got stuck there. Like I hit a wall where I was really not making a lot of money, couldn't see a future for myself in it. And so, as much as I love food and restaurants and cooking, it just didn't feel like a practical choice to move forward with it. And also, the culture of restaurants was certainly at the time, but still remains to leave much to be desired. It's not known as a really, it's a pretty punishing industry. And so, I thought it would be more sensible and practical to, do what other people who are smart and have no direction have chosen to do for, for all time, which is, go to law school. So I had become an attorney not out of like some deep passion for the law, but just because I really didn't know what else to do. I felt like I tried pursuing my passion and I failed at it. And, now here I was. But I actually think that, being an attorney, having that stability, but then hating waking up in the morning, it led me to really rethink what I was doing when I actually got fired from the role. And I honestly, I'd really deserved to get fired. Like mostly I just wasn't trying very hard, and I was getting paid a lot of money to not try very hard. And I'd never failed at something like that. I was someone who was always quite motivated and usually successful, but I was successful because I cared about stuff. And this was, it felt like a real wake up call to fail because I didn't care. And so to be honest, when I decided to, open Homeroom and like pursue this dream of opening a restaurant, I I really wanted to be the kind of person who looked forward to waking up to go to work in the morning, but I had never personally had that experience. Like I hadn't worked somewhere where that was true. So it was a
Yeah.
bit of a Hail Mary, to be honest. I was like, well, I haven't seen this happen, but maybe I can make it happen for myself. And yeah, and so that was sort of the decade-long journey I went on with Homeroom, and I did figure out how to make that happen. And it's really why I wrote the book, so that other people can learn how to do that too.
Yeah. So, becoming an attorney, dabbling in the food, you started a restaurant and you developed a lot of skills while you were volunteering and cooking in the industry. So you learned a lot about that part. But what was it like for you to transition to being actually the business owner? And like you said, it didn't work before, but it ended up working out in the future attempts.
Yeah, that was a rough transition. Because like I said, I really hadn't had leadership at that point modeled for me in a way that I was really excited to emulate. So I had these very grand ambitions of what kind of a restaurant I wanted to build, what kind of a culture I wanted to create in terms of being a place to work, but I had no idea how to do it. So it was pretty overwhelming. And I mean, honestly, much of the book is sort of the funny stories of the trial and error that it took to learn some pretty hard lessons. But, um, you know, with the hope that other people don't have to suffer those lessons themselves and can just, take what I learned and make it work for them. But, um, yeah, I mean, it was intimidating, and I can't say I was a great boss in those early years. I was certainly trying, but I didn't know what I was doing. And um, but I learned a lot, and I'm super proud that, in the end, like the average industry turnover is for restaurants in the United States anyway, it's actually less than 90 days. It's a really horrifying statistic. It's just really hard
My
place.
jaw dropped. I
Yeah.
read that. It's like,
Yeah.
whoa.
But our average tenure was more than 2.5 years. And at that time I had like 100 employees. So, that is a pretty impressive figure, and I think speaks to how effective it is when you actually do take the time to build in leadership techniques that make uh, day-to-day work like meaningful and enjoyable for people.
Was there a pivotal moment when you knew that you needed to um, stepped into that role of the leader? Like, because I know sometimes people are like, "Oh, I'm not a leader," but you had to step in and truly create the culture that you wanted to. And
Mhm.
what steps did it take you to start creating that?
I've never had an issue with walking in and being the leader. I actually really enjoy it. I think that something that I was very aware of, though, is that there was a certain type of leadership that I wanted to do that I wasn't sure how. So I always wanted to really sort of share to the extent possible, like power, responsibility, decision making with a wider group of people, because I think that that's really how you get the best results, right? And it is more fun to do business that way, right? And
Yeah.
it is just better. Like 10 minds are simply better than one. So, but that's not the way that most organizations, particularly professional kitchens or any large company, is ever structured. It's not like, how do we build meaningful daily collaboration? Most companies are very hierarchical, and so a lot of what I had to play with and learn about was like, how do you get people to engage in a meaningful way and collaborate, but also, function and move forward. You can't be like talking about things all the time. So,
Right. Yeah.
how do you sort of balance collaboration and progress? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really important. And I know you wrote an article that went viral with the Washington Post on workplace harassment. Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, so for years we had actually developed lots of systems, that I write about in the book about, how do you develop systems of consistent collaboration, communication, decision making, information sharing, all these things. So we had this really great culture of, like continuous improvement and, um, really a lot of like trust and communication, I would say. So I was rather shocked when I started receiving like a flood of emails from female servers saying they needed to talk to me. And I was really worried. And it was basically that they were all, what they communicated is that one of them had been harassed in this pretty horrific way at the restaurant by a customer. And when that woman started sharing her story, it was this sort of pivotal moment for all these women to start saying, oh, hey, something like that happened to me, something like that happened to me. So they were all experiencing harassment, but I had no clue, which was pretty embarrassing given, what a like great and communicative culture we had,
Yeah.
I was truly shocked, and really dismayed. And I think what was further disconcerting is that a lot of the women said that they were reporting these things, but that just nothing was happening, particularly with things that seemed not super offensive, maybe. And that was doubly a problem. And, what we realized it was is that a lot of the management at that time were men and they were really beloved by these female servers. It's not that they were like these insensitive, jerky guys. It's just, what the women were communicating, were it to happen to them, it wouldn't feel threatening. Perhaps it's just a really different standard. Our life experiences are different. And so we did what we always do with a big problem, which is involve the people who, are really experiencing it to come together and help figure out how to fix it. So that same group of servers that reported the problem helped solve it and came up with this system, which I mean has since been, I testified about it in front of the EEOC in Washington. They adopted it as a recommendation, and it has since been used by bars and restaurants around the world. But I mean, I'm happy to tell you about how the system works if that's helpful. But we developed this really great system that just really curbed harassment at the restaurant. And it, to me, was such a story of if you can build a culture with like communication, collaboration, problem solving, like you can do anything, including changing the world, like a really intractable problem, you can
Yeah.
actually make a big difference.
Yeah. And when I think about what you were doing in law, you're making a different case by case, but what shifted is that you could make a bigger impact doing not only what you love, but kind of following the course where the breadcrumbs lead you, right? And working closely with your staff. And when you think about feminine leadership and a feminine work culture, um, what are the things that are needed to develop that type of culture?
Yeah, I didn't embrace that term for a really long time. I just thought the stuff we were doing, um, I don't know, it felt like it made sense, or, I would have just called it sort of these like alternative work practices. But over time, I really started to see them as actually like deeply feminine in nature, and came to talk about them more that way and be really embraced by people of all genders who worked on our staff. But I'd really describe it as, a focus on communication, collaboration, and collective success.